Does anybody have or use a PC instead of a Mac and does graphics stuff on it? Anybody?
My wife.
Ha! Boy, I agree with you, but anyway, I have, this is a brand new program. It hadn't even been opened yet. It was given to me and it's of no use to me. It's Corel Paint Shop Pro Ultimate. It's for a Windows PC. Anybody have an interest in that? It's free. What's that?
Great.
It is yours.
Thank you.
All righty. Well, welcome to our continuing study in the book of Daniel. Before we get into this, let's talk to God in prayer. Father, we thank you for a beautiful day that you've given to us, for the opportunity to assemble here. Once again, Lord, we thank you for the delight that it is to peer into your word every time, every moment, every passage. How great it is that we can learn more about you, about your son Jesus, about your plans for this world, and about ourselves. So as we continue our study through the book of Daniel here in chapter 11, I pray that you would help us to get a grasp of the things that were being referred to by Daniel and the things that have come to pass, so that we can appreciate not only your word, but the prophecies in your word even better. And we thank you for all these things today. In Jesus' name, amen. I have mentioned a number of times, and I don't know about you, but I love studying history. That's not always been the case. When I was younger, I didn't care for history at all. I didn't do well in high school history. I wasn't interested in it. But I found as I got older, I began to appreciate it more, and I really enjoy it today. And I think part of the reason is when you study history, we know what current events are like and where we're at. Well, when you study history, you're able to see where we were and how we got to where we are today. So I think it's a valuable study. Chapter 11 in the book of Daniel is all about history. And as you get on through the verses, it's like there is more history in this chapter than there is in the whole rest of the book. Verse after verse after verse, item after item after item. The interesting thing is, as we study chapter 11, this stuff has all happened in history in the past. But when Daniel wrote the book, none of it had happened yet. It was all future, so therefore it was prophetic. In other words, Daniel was writing prophecy about things that were going to come to pass before they happened. And therein lies the rub. You see, you're familiar with the expression, the straw that broke the camel's back? Chapter 11, Daniel, is the straw that broke the camel's back in the minds of Bible critics. And the reason I say that is because when we look at chapter 11 and go down verse after verse after verse, we can pinpoint each one of these occurrences to a historical event. The order that they transpired, the locations, the people, the everything. It falls in line, verse after verse after verse. So much so that Bible critics have said it is absolutely impossible that this was written before it happened because it's too perfect. I mean, after all, who could possibly tell hundreds of years in advance what was going to happen in hundreds of years? I don't know, maybe God, who inspired Daniel to write these things, and so he wrote them. And so, putting the critics aside, the fact of the matter is Daniel chapter 11 lays out what for us today is a history of what already has come to pass perfectly, sequentially, line after line. And so as we get on through these, I'm going to be giving you a number of names and dates, what happened, when it happened, and try not to glaze over. I know when I was in high school history, and as soon as the teacher would start talking about names and dates, I checked out. I started thinking about Friday's coming. What am I doing for the weekend? But this stuff is important, so let's stick to the task here as we get on through it. Now we already started some of it last couple of weeks. Chapter 11, the first year of Darius the Mede, I arose to be an encouragement. So we know that the what is happening is beginning in the 6th century BC, 539. That's when the Medo-Persian Empire took over the Babylonian Empire. And so as we work through these passages, we will find that the historical events take place in the 5th century, the 4th century, the 3rd century, and even into the 2nd century BC. So we're talking about a pretty wide expanse of time that all these events took place. So verse 2, Daniel says, and now, or the angel says, and now I will tell you the truth. Behold, 3 more kings are going to arise in Persia, then a 4th will gain far more riches than all of them. And as I already shared before what the names of those 3 kings were, and it's really of little consequence. What's most important, though, is this 4th king. Because this 4th king was Xerxes. He was the king that the book of Esther is written about. And in the book of Esther, we looked at that first chapter where Xerxes had a wife by the name, a queen by the name of Vashti, who, remember, he had a huge celebration. It took a half a year, and then he threw a banquet for a week. Everybody was drunk. He ordered Vashti to come in and show off her beauty to everybody else that was in the room. She refused. She ended up getting deposed. She was no longer queen. That brought us to the end of chapter 1. When you come to chapter 2, that's when God works his amazing wonder, and the queen ends up being a young Jewish girl, Hadassah. We know her as Esther. Now, and you know, the interesting thing, and this is what I love, Esther is the one book in the Bible that doesn't mention God's name anywhere. It's the only one. And yet you would have to be blind not to see God at work in the circumstances in history as it played out, which is true even today. So many people don't see God, but he's at work right now around us all the time. So in chapter 1, Vashti gets deposed. In chapter 2, Xerxes ends up marrying Esther, the Jewish girl that becomes a queen. It is between those 2 chapters that battle of Thermopylae took place. It's between those 2 chapters that the massive Persian army of well over 100,000 soldiers, we're not sure exactly how many, but well over 100,000 soldiers, attempted to attack the Greek states coming from the east to the west. And when they did, the Greeks, of course, held them off at the pass of Thermopylae, and the Persians couldn't get through for a week. A lot of them died. Eventually, they found a way around, destroyed the Greeks, and took over. So in Daniel chapter 11, that middle of verse 2, the 4th will gain far more riches than all of them. As soon as he becomes strong through his riches, he will arise the whole empire against the realm of Greece. Xerxes, and that, by the way, that battle took place in 480 BC, so 5th century BC. And then in verse 3, Daniel says, and a mighty king will arise. That mighty king was none other, and about 130, 140 years transpire. So the Persians attacked the Greeks. They defeated them eventually after the Battle of Thermopylae. So now you have Persians running all over the Greek territories. And then down through the years, a man came to prominence in the northern part of Greece. His name was Philip. Perhaps you've heard of the King Philip of Macedonia. Philip of Macedonia, the one thing he accomplished, the Greeks, they were all, you've heard the term city-states? City-states, that's how government was laid out in the Greek, in what today is the Greek territories. Every city had its own government. There was a king in each city, and they were all separate. They didn't come together. Philip of Macedon, the Macedonian of Philip of Macedon, he came along, and his one single important accomplishment was that he was able to get the city-states to unify, to become the Greece that we know today. But it was his son that took that to a whole new level. His son was Alexander the Great. And so at this point, in verse 3, when he says, the angel tells Daniel, a mighty king will arise, and he will rule with great authority and do as he pleases. That was Alexander. As I've said many times, the most amazing thing about Alexander's army was the speed at which it could move. It was lightning speed. And everywhere they went, they would defeat the enemy and take over. Alexander, now remember, the Persians are all around the Greek city-states. Philip of Macedon gets them unified. Alexander then takes over when his father dies, and he wiped out the Persians and then started moving east. And as he was moving east, he was taking over the lands that he was traveling through. He finally got over to Mesopotamia. And when he got into Mesopotamia, he got all the way to Babylon and then the palace at Susa. And he defeated every single army that he came against. And I've said this a couple times before, and it mystifies me to this day. Alexander is the only general in history that never lost a single battle ever, except the one with stupidity. He became a drunk, and that ultimately ended up costing him his life. For a short while, he was in control of the world only for a handful of years, and then he died, and as I said, he had nobody to take over. His son was just a kid. And so the generals ended up dividing up the whole land. And those important four generals controlled, there was a general in the east, one in the west, one in the north, and one in the south. Those are the ones that we're interested in. So verse 4 says, but as soon as he has arisen, that's Alexander, his kingdom will be broken up. And that is exactly what happened. He died young. His kingdom was broken up and parceled out toward the 4 points of the compass, though not to his own descendants, nor according to his authority which he wielded, for his sovereignty will be uprooted and given to others besides them. And so the power, the authority of Greece passed outside of Alexander's hands to his generals. They divided up the whole realm of everything that he controlled. And it was over like that for him. Then, verse 5 says, then the king of the south will grow strong, along with one of his princes, who will gain ascendancy over him and obtain dominion. Now, let me read that verse again and kind of get a picture in your head of what's being said. Verse 5, then the king of the south will grow strong. So that was Ptolemy. Remember, one of the Alexander's generals was a guy by the name of Ptolemy. He was the general that took over Egypt from Alexandria in Egypt. The king of the south will go strong. That was Ptolemy, along with one of his princes who will gain ascendancy over him and obtain dominion. So there were a bunch of intergeneral battles that were taking place. I mean, you can imagine this. The whole kingdom of Greece gets divided up. Actually, it got divided up among 6 generals, but 4 of them really were of consequences. So you have a general in control of the north, one in control of the south, one control of the west, one control of the east. What are the chances that those generals are going to be satisfied with controlling that one little piece of the pie that they got? Very slim. In fact, it didn't happen. And so there began a series of intergeneral wars in which one general was trying to take over the other to gain his power. In one of those intergeneral wars, a guy by the name of Antigonus, so he was the general in charge of the east, which is Asia Minor. Antigonus then he begins to attack Seleucus, who's in the north. So I hate doing this because I'm always backwards from you, so bear with me. North, south, we have that. To me, east, west, okay? So the Antigonus in the east eyes the power and the land of Seleucus in the west, in the north, and he's saying, I'm going to take that over. So Antigonus begins to attack Seleucus. When Antigonus attacks Seleucus, Seleucus is the general who now is king up in Syria. What do you suppose he did? He was one of those kings that said, it's better to live to fight another day. And he hightails it out of town. He goes south. He goes down to Egypt because his buddy Ptolemy is down there. And so Seleucus goes down to Egypt and joins with Ptolemy. And that's what this means in verse 5. The king of the south, that's Ptolemy, will go strong along with one of his princes, that's Seleucus, who comes down from the north. So they formed this alliance. And then it says, who will gain ascendancy over him and obtain dominion. So what happens is Seleucus comes down to Ptolemy. They create an alliance. And over a period of time, Seleucus becomes the dominant of the 2 kings. And he now begins to control Ptolemy. It's like backwards from what Ptolemy anticipated. So now you have this northern king in Egypt, in the south, who starts to control things. Then he goes on. He says, his domain will be a great dominion indeed. So when Seleucus and Ptolemy got together, you have the forces that came down from the north, the forces in the south. They formed a pretty huge conglomerate of an army. And then Seleucus started taking over. Now he becomes more powerful than Ptolemy. What you have now is Seleucus is running things. The northern king is running things down in the south in Egypt. Verse 6. After some years, they will form an alliance, and the daughter of the king of the south will come to the king of the north to carry out a peaceful arrangement. So after a period of time, once the army in the south was now big enough that Seleucus took his army, marched back north to fight against Antigonus, the guy who had come from the east to take over the north. So Seleucus now goes back home and takes over back home. So now you have this separation, king of the north, king of the south, Seleucus and Ptolemy, these 2 guys. When verse 6 says here, after some years they will form an alliance. Now remember, Seleucus, who's up in the north, had been down in the south with Ptolemy. They became an alliance. Seleucus now goes back up north. Here's Ptolemy in the south thinking, I remember when Seleucus came down from the north, I thought we were getting into a pretty firm alliance, and he ended up stabbing me in the back and taking over. Now he's back at home. I need to do something to make sure that that doesn't happen again. So Ptolemy had this brilliant idea. He had a daughter by the name of Bernice. And he called her in one day and said, Bernice, sweetheart, honey, I have something I want you to do. Sure, Dad, what do you want me to do? I want you to pack your bags. You're going on a trip. Sounds great. Where am I going? Up to Syria. Okay, what am I going to do up there? You're going to marry the king. What happened was Ptolemy had been exchanging messages with Seleucus up in Syria. And he convinced Seleucus to divorce his wife, Laodice. And Ptolemy told Seleucus, I got a bargain for you. You should divorce your wife, marry my daughter. That will give us a huge alliance, north and south. Nobody will be able to defeat us then. We'll have two armies fighting with each other against the rest of the world. We're going to take over everything. Seleucus wasn't that sharp. It sounded like a good idea to him. And so he told his wife, pack your bags. You're moving. And he divorced her and he married Ptolemy's daughter. Verse 6. After some years, they will form an alliance. The daughter of the king of the south will come to the king of the north to carry out a peaceful arrangement. But, this is a big but she will not retain her position of power. She will not retain her position of power. Some 50 years have passed from the beginning of all this. Now on the throne, instead of Seleucus, Antiochus is ruling Syria. He's the king. Ptolemy's daughter marries him. And you have to ask yourself a question. Why would the king of Syria agree to such an arrangement to divorce his wife and marry this foreign woman that's coming up from Egypt? I'll tell you why. The same reason almost everything in the world takes place: money. The king of Egypt, when he sent his daughter up to marry the king of Syria, sent a dowry with her. And the dowry was a huge chunk of the riches of Egypt. And so when she gets up there and walks in the door, here I am, probably the first thing he asked her was, where's the money? Because he was about to become wealthy. So this marriage of convenience takes place. King of Egypt, or the king of Syria, married to the daughter of the king of Egypt. And I think what was really in Ptolemy's mind was that, my daughter goes from Egypt up to Syria, marries the king. They're going to have a child. And when they have a child who will one day become king of Syria, that child is my grandson. And so the king of Egypt intended, through this brokered marriage arrangement, to be able ultimately to control all of Egypt and all of Syria. So it was about 246 BC. Bernice's father, remember, she's the Egyptian that went up to marry the Syrian king. Bernice's father, who was Ptolemy II at that time, he died. And the marriage fell apart. She's from Egypt, up there married to the king. Her father dies, and their marriage falls apart. And when their marriage fell apart, the king of Syria, guess what he did? Dear Laodice, that's his former wife, so sorry how things turned out between us. I would think it would be great if you come back home and we'll get married again. And that's exactly what happened. The king of Egypt dies. The king of Syria's marriage to the daughter of the king of Egypt falls apart. The king of Syria divorces her and remarries his former wife. Perfect solution, right? All except the fact that the king of Syria didn't realize. You ever hear that old expression, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned? This was a woman scorned. And so Laodice, I saw, anybody you ever watch those reels on Facebook? Some of those are hilarious. I saw one where there was a guy and his wife, and he must have done something that really upset her, really upset her. And so he's sitting in the living room on the couch, and she brings him in a drink of something, puts it on the table right beside him. She says, "Here's the drink." She turns around, she's just starting to walk out, and he says, "Honey, I just want to apologize. You know, for whatever he had done, whatever he had said," he said, "I was absolutely wrong. All my fault, not your fault. I'll never do it again." And as he says that, he's picking up this drink to drink that she gave him. And as he said that, and she said, "Are you serious that you're wrong and I'm right?" And he says, "Absolutely." She grabs a glass. She says, "Don't drink that." That's pretty much the same thing that happened here. Laodice, the former wife, the scorned wife, and now the new wife again, brought the king a mixed drink, which he should not have drunk, but he did. And he died. He was poisoned. Laodice was a very careful woman too, because she's thinking, I need to make sure that nobody else tries to cut me out of anything. And so she arranged for the murder of Bernice. And let me see, in verse verse 6. Yeah, verse 6 again. After some years I form an alliance. The daughter of the king of the south will come to the king of the north to carry out a peaceful arrangement. She will not retain her position of power because she's poisoned, nor will he remain with his power because he was poisoned, but she will be given up along with those who brought her in, and the one who sired her, as well as he who supported her in those times. So the king of Syria is dead. The king of Egypt is dead. The wife that came from Egypt is dead. And all the entourage that came with her, they're all dead. All murdered or ordered to be murdered by Laodice, the queen. Verse 7. But one of the descendants of her line will arise in his place, and he will come against their army and enter the fortress of the king of the north, and he will deal with them and display great strength. This is a reference to Ptolemy III. Now Bernice's father, the king that sent her up there to marry, that was Ptolemy II. He's dead. His son Ptolemy III takes over. So Ptolemy III comes up and attacks Syria. And like I've said before, you have this constant set of battles that's going on between the north and the south. Syria attacks Egypt. Egypt attacks Syria. And the amazing thing is, and we're wondering, so what? Who cares? We're talking about Daniel and the Jews. Well, if you know what your map of the Middle East looks like, here's Syria here, here's Egypt here. What's between the two? Israel. And so every time an army marched, one army from north to south or vice versa, they had to go through Israel. And Israel took the brunt of all of those armies marching north and south constantly. So this battle's taking place. Verse 7, Egypt's Ptolemy III attacks Syria. Verse 8, let me read verse 7 and stay in context. One of the descendants of her line will arise in his place. He will come against their army, enter the fortress of the king of the north. So king of the south attacks the king of the north. He will deal with them, display great strength. Also their gods with their metal images and their precious vessels of silver and gold, he will take into captivity to Egypt. And he on his part will refrain from attacking the king of the north for some years. So the king of the south goes up, defeats the king of the north, pretty much takes all the silver and gold and everything he can, brings them back down to Egypt. Then he never again attacks the Seleucid dynasty up in Syria. And then we come to verse 9. Then the latter will enter the realm of the king of the south, but will return to his own land. And this came about exactly like it says in 240 BC. Seleucus II attacks Ptolemy in Egypt, but this time he's defeated and he returns home. And then several years go by, and we come to verse 10. His sons will mobilize and assemble a multitude of great forces, and one of them will keep on coming and overflow and pass through, that he may again wage war up to his very fortress. And so in verse 10, it's telling us that Syria attacks Egypt. So now we have the south attack, or the north attacking the south. Verse 11. Then the king of the south will be enraged and go forth and fight with the king of the north. Then the latter will raise a great multitude, but that multitude will be given into the hand of the former. Interesting. So Syria attacks Egypt. Seleucus attacking Ptolemy. At this time, Ptolemy IV is king in Egypt. Remember, Ptolemy II is the king that sent his daughter up to marry the king of Syria. He's dead. His son takes his throne. There's battles between north and south. Now he's dead. Now his son, Ptolemy IV, is on the throne. Ptolemy IV had an interesting characteristic. He was lazy. He was a lazy king. All he wanted to do was watch TV. Take it easy. He didn't want any trouble. He didn't want any battles. He wanted everything to go smoothly. Sounds like a Democrat. But now all of a sudden that gets disrupted because the king of the north invades Egypt. When that happens, that really angered this lazy king. And the lazy king said, it's time to let's muster the troops. We're going to go to battle. So there was a battle. And verse 11, king of the south will be enraged. That's this lazy king. Go forth and fight with the king of the north. Then the latter, the king of the north, will raise a great multitude, but that multitude will be given into the hand of the former, which is the king of the south. When the multitude is carried away, his heart will be lifted up, and he will cause tens of thousands to fall, yet he will not prevail. Ptolemy wins the battle, but in verse 12, he's lifted up with pride or by pride. And what happened here, and this, once again, history bears this out. So the king of the south comes down, fights against the king of the north. The king of the north is angry instead of being lazy now. He fights back, and he's winning the battle. The king of the army of the north, then they turn tail and they start to run. If the king of the south had pursued them, he could have destroyed them. But he was lazy. And so rather than pursuing them, he wanted to go back to watching TV. He told his army to go back home. Let them go. They won't be any trouble to us anymore. The king of the south let the king of the north, their army, go back home. That was the biggest mistake that he could ever have made. Because that mistake was going to be severely costly to the king of the south. And I think we have about 1 minute left, so we'll hold that off there, and next week we'll find out how costly a mistake that was that the king of the south left the north army go home. Any comments, questions, thoughts? Everybody's writing down names and dates. Okay, let's close. Oh, I see a hand back here. Say that again. The name of? Oh, the capital cities. Alexandria was the capital city of Egypt, and the capital of Syria at that time. I'm not sure where Seleucus would have started. It would end up being, I don't know, maybe Nineveh. I'm not sure. I'll check that out for next week, though. But the major city was Alexandria in Egypt. Is that the second buzzer? Okay, let's pray. Father, thank you for our time together this morning as we dismiss from this time and look forward to our worship service. Again, we thank you that Christ can be exalted and that you, in spite of all of the battles and the wars and everything that raged, we see that you were still totally in control, and you were the one that would be, is now, and will always be glorified. We give you thanks in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. See